You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Johannes Ekström of Avatar. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hey there, everybody. How you doing? I want to take just a minute here and talk to you about our wonderful and beautiful folks over at Sinusoid. Sinusoid Custom Guitar Cables. I want to talk specifically about their Slate instrument cable. It was designed in-house from the ground up. Everything from how it slides on the floor, to the amount of capacitance it has, to how it feels in the hand. Everything about it was designed by the boys in-house. And if you want to hear a little bit more detail on actually the process behind how they do things over there, it's a lot different. It's a lot more involved than what you might think. And so if you want to hear a little more about that, I did an episode with Andy here, 10 episodes ago or so. Andy, the guy, the head honcho over there. And he goes into some detail about the actual process, about how they go about designing things and what kind of the thought process is behind it. And it's really interesting. It's a lot more than what I expected. And I think you will be pleasantly surprised as well. It's very, very cool. So go to sinusoid.com, check out the Slate. You'll like it. I also want to talk to you about Gun Street Wiring Shop. You checked them out yet? You haven't? Why? Why have you not checked out Gun Street Wiring Shop yet? Your guitar, that one over there with the scratchy pots, it needs fixed. You don't need this in your life anymore. You don't need the pain and heartache of bad guitar electronics. You need good guitar electronics, and you need good customer service because, if you're anything like me, it can be a little bit challenging to do soldering and electrical work. I've not really done that much of it, but even I was able to install the harness in my Les Paul, and if I can do it, you can do it. And Gun Street is there to help. That's part of why they're so awesome. Sean really helps through the whole process, not just, hey, sell you a harness and see you later. He's there to support you if you have any questions or you need any assistance. That's what he's all about. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check out their wares. And if you don't see exactly what you want, shoot them an email. They can make it happen. I know this from personal experience. gunstreetwiringshop.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the ToneMob.com podcast, the show about guitar tone and the people behind it. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Mr. Matthew Hoops of 1981 Inventions and Relient K. How's it going?
It's going good. It's both of those things.
Both of those things are
yeah.
Splendid? All right.
Both of my, endeavors.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yes.
You've been a busy man. We did a quick catch up before we hit the mic, so to speak. You've been up to a whole lot of shenanigans in the last year or so.
Yeah, life has really changed for me in almost every way, since getting married, and my wife has a lot of kids from before, and it's been an amazing time, but a lot different. And we moved in that time and remodeled a house, and it's been a cool thing. So, and I started building guitar pedals.
Yeah. You had a band for a while. Let's use this as an opportunity before we go off the deep end, as you and I have already demonstrated a very strong ability to do.
It's easy. It's easy. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Let's take a quick step back, and maybe for some of the listeners who may not be familiar, kind of go through your musical backstory and what led to the current state of things.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that's a long story for some.
Yeah,
but
I'll try to make it very, very quick.
No, we got all the time in the world. Go for it.
Oh,
Go deep.
it's no big deal. Well, I met Matt in second grade, and it's actually true. We were in church choir together, and
nice.
then when we were in high school, we both started picking up the guitar around the same time. We were probably like 14, 15 years old. And also around the same time, we both got obsessed with like punk rock music, and which to us at the time was like, Blink-182 and Green Day and stuff like that.
Right.
MXPX, things like of that nature. And we both just got obsessed with it. We both would just go to shows all the time. And all this time we were learning to play guitar and learning how to play our favorite songs. And we just kind of started playing together pretty early on. We played together for probably a year before we started playing with a drummer even. We would just kind of jam guitars together. And, eventually kind of moved to Matt started putting together more finished songs, and we kind of started, doing things, and we made a recording, and we got a offer for a record deal, and we were like, okay, yeah, let's keep doing this. So we started doing shows, and just kind of having
how did that happen? Generally, people don't just start writing songs and then get a record deal. How did that?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. We met guy locally who was a guitar player. He played guitar for DC Talk, the old Christian band, and he did a demo for us early on. And when he was on the road with DC Talk, Toby, the singer of the band, was asking him about things that he'd been producing, and so he showed him a few things, and then Toby said, well, wait, what's the other CD in your bag? This is like the 90s. And he was like, oh, that's just some kids from my neighborhood. You don't want to listen to that. It's no big deal. And
oh no.
And so Toby put it on, and Toby was like, no, I do want to hear it. The cover looks interesting to me. It was like this like clip art version of some sort of like truck or digger or something. I can't remember, some sort of forklift or something. I can't remember what was on the cover, but so he put it on, and Toby was like, oh, I feel this. And he started flipping through the tracks, and he said, this album's going to sell 6 figures. And Mark was like, haha, yeah, whatever. And so,
right.
But anyway, yeah, Toby was serious. He really, and Toby's been in our corner, he's such a good friend and a trusted, colleague, through the last 20 years, really. And, I still hang out with him, and we play golf together sometimes. And, he's just been always very supportive of what we do. And really kind of advocated for us. And so he helped us get a record deal through his record label, Goatee Records. And, just kind of started from there. And even from that point, we thought, okay, maybe we'll do an album and tour for a year and then go to college. And, we were like, well, maybe we'll make a second album and tour from there and then go to college. And then we're like, well, I guess we'll make a third now at this point, and so we just kind of kept doing it. And that was, more than 20 years ago now. So pretty wild.
So you did just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. We just
kept doing it. Yeah. So we've been through all sorts of things over the years. We did 2 records with Capitol Records, one with RCA, and then back to our own imprint under Goatee, which is called Mono versus Stereo. And we have done the last 2 records through that outlet. So
I know we try to talk about gear sometimes on this show, but I do find it interesting to talk to, actual musicians who have went out and done things and made their living from that, for like you guys did for so long. Like so many guys like me are just basically hobbyists with a gear obsession. And it's interesting for us to talk to and hear about the actual professional side of things. And so I'm just kind of curious about the label stuff. How was it different doing the major label things, the Capitol, the RCA versus your own, as far as positives, negatives? Just like, what was the main differences there?
I think the main difference was when we got signed to Capitol. It was all of a sudden we could get on. We did the Tonight Show with Jay Leno 3 times. We did that whole circuit. We did Conan. We did just kind of all the late night talk shows. We had been trying to get on Warped Tour forever, and we got on Warped Tour like that year. And then we did it again 2 years later, and again 3 years later, so it just kind of felt like this immediate kind of legitimacy. But then also, they would say things like, oh, we need to do a music video and it needs to cost $375,000, and we were like, what? This is crazy. And I felt like at the time, but definitely in hindsight, it was, money was being spent kind of recklessly. And, it was kind of the end of that era when people actually sold albums, like physically recorded products, and iTunes was a thing. And, it was just kind of like a different era.
What time frame roughly was this year-wise?
This is probably like 2004.
Okay. My glory years.
Yeah, exactly. So, and even the way that it happened, we had 3 albums, and 2 of them were actually like gold certified albums. This is like through Goatee. This is our first, our second and third album. Mm-hmm. And so there were major labels that were interested in what we were doing, and it probably happened 10 or 12 times where we'd meet with an A&R guy, the major label, we'd talk about the deal, they would say, okay, we'll have you a deal on Monday, and then it would just never come. And we were like, we had kind of just given up on the whole process of it, and we kind of felt like a little bit like outsiders in the music industry. But also we felt like, we could just kind of continue to do whatever we do, no matter the context or literally the label that was put upon it. So we just kind of kept doing what we were doing, and we put out our album called in 2004. And it was after that we put out the album. Goatee was part owned by EMI at the time, and Capitol was part of EMI. And so literally they just moved that record over to Capitol, and they just like told us about it. It was not even like we had a signing day with Capitol or anything. It was like they just decided to move it over internally. And we were like, well, okay. So the album came out. We were on tour at the time. And the first version of that record, of that CD even, doesn't say Capitol on it. But then the second one does. And so like we'd never talked to anyone at Capitol. We had never, it's just kind of a funny story in hindsight that it felt almost like adding to the surreal nature of that time, that it seemed to like not actually physically be happening. So I remember like first seeing a copy of our album with the Capitol logo on the back and being like, okay, yeah, I guess this is real,
Right. What they told us was true. That's bizarre.
So it was funny. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different sides of it. We did an album with, our 5th album we did with Howard Benson. It was the one after that. And so that was different, working with like a major producer. He had just done like My Chemical Romance and All American Rejects, and who else had he done? He's just a very storied producer. Everything from like early POD and Marilyn Manson to like a lot of pop rock stuff. He did like the Hoobastank record right before that was big at the time, so it's just like I'm really dating this era. But that was
like I said, the glory years, man. That was a good time.
Yeah, it was a really unique experience for us at the time to work with a producer in that context, in that type of a studio in LA, going out there. And literally the records before we had done either in our producer's basement or, just kind of like on our own kind of thing. And, always being budget conscious. And, this just felt crazy to go out to LA and have this experience. But it was overall very positive, and I am thankful for it, in hindsight. And I still keep up with a lot of the techs and engineers from that session.
So that kind of is a nice segue into what I was going to ask next. At the time, like, were you always a gear nerd, or did that develop later, or how, we've rapid fired through the majority of the process, but like
that's a lot of our career arc, but
but what was it always a thing that you were into, or is that more recent?
No, I'm going to say yes. From very, very early on, I remember it was 98 or 99, we were playing our first shows, and I was constantly picking our producer's brain, Mark, about gear and about all the things he owned. And, he was just so helpful in like helping me set up things and build cables and build pedal boards. And he was showing me what kind of wood to go buy, and then go buy it. He was telling me all these tricks of like, you go buy an old suitcase at the thrift store, and then you cut a piece of wood exactly to that suitcase, and then you get all this foam and put it in it, and then you go and buy this industrial Velcro, and then you lay out your board, and then you put it on there. And, at that time I was using like power strips, there wasn't really like power supplies, it was just like a different era. And, I would put every pedal I owned on it, so I had like a wah pedal. I never used a wah pedal during our show, but I had it on there on the board. And so, from very early on, I was very interested in all of that side of it, like understanding what it was, knowing the difference. I always felt like very lucky to be able to pick up one of Mark's guitars and put it on a recording. If I picked up, his 335 or his Strat or his Tele, or even his acoustic guitar, I felt like, wow, what an honor to play this instrument, And so I always was like, had an appreciation for that. And pretty early on, I just didn't have any money. I was playing a 70s Fender Bassman, and it's not the worst amp in the world, but for this one was pretty bad. This one that I was playing, and I would get it fixed, and it just was still sounding bad. And this will just totally bring the humility, but I was actually playing on our first tour, when we left for our first tour, I was playing a Boss Metal Zone into a 120 watt Fender Bassman. And
yeah, you were. Yes, horrendous. You were.
It was, disturbing. But even then I had some sort of tonal sensibility. Like I knew that it didn't sound that good. And, the Metal Zone is so scooped on the mid-range. And I remember running the mid-range on the amp, on like 9 or 10, just to like try to like even things out. Like I could hear what I wanted it to be. I didn't know what to use. I didn't have the money. I had no experience at the time. And I think I bought a Sovtech amp right after that, and I really liked that, the MiG 100. And then, but it kept breaking down on me. Like literally one summer, it broke down 3 times, and I think I just got a bad one. And so I moved that and got rid of it, and I saved up all of my money from the whole tour that we did in the summer to buy a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier. And I was like, okay, this is going to be the end all of end all amps. This is what all my favorite bands use, from like Foo Fighters to Blink-182 to, all the legit bands use this. And so I spent all my money on the dual rectifier, and I played it for almost a year. And this is the first time I started using a rat pedal. I started realizing that for most things, I preferred using the rat pedal into the clean channel of the Mesa Boogie than the distortion channel on the amp. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was interesting. And the only thing that I really missed was I wanted more top end on the clean channel. And then I felt like the overdrive channel was just, I could turn the top end and the mid-range all the way down, and it was just still, or I could turn the mid-range wherever, and the top end was just so harsh on any setting. But that's why I liked the Rat. I felt like I could make the Rat sound more even sounding, even through the clean channel of the Mesa Boogie. So, it goes back pretty far. So I'll say that. And then I had that Mesa Boogie not even a year, and I came across in the music shop below our old rehearsal space in Ohio. I came across a 1972 Marshall Super Lead
Ooh.
that was, it was $500, back then. And I was like, oh man. And the guy that owned the shop was really trying to get me to buy it. And I was like, I don't know. And I bought it the day we were leaving for a show, and we got to the show and I plugged it in and I played my rat pedal through it. And then I plugged in the Mesa Boogie, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, the Marshall is better for what I want to do. The Marshall is this is exactly hitting a spot that I have not been able to hit." And I never played the Mesa Boogie after that. I literally never went back to it. And not that I think it's a horrible sound or a poorly made amp. I definitely hear people play them all the time, and I think that they sound great. But it's for me, it felt like the first time that I felt something click for me and my sound was the rat pedal through that Super Lead.
And is that, once you kind of got that established, was that it, or did you progress into other things from there?
Oh no, it went crazy from there. I mean, yeah, I started getting into all sorts of different overdrive and fuzz and delay and reverb pedals, and just kind of the whole thing. I got into, like, I would use phaser pedals, and that's on our 2004 album. Mm-hmm. You can hear phaser all over that record, and it's because it was one of the only effects that I had at the time. But
do you remember what pedal that was?
Yeah, it was just the classic Orange Phase 90.
Oh, gotcha.
And then right after that record, I had I did a modified version of that pedal, and basically just made it more subtle, more like a Phase 45, but even just kind of like a little less on the blend side.
Right.
But it's funny. I said this a few years ago that I've been into guitar effects basically my entire career as a musician, but I feel like I've only really been able to use them. I feel like I've only been able to use them well in the last 3 or 4 years, or I've only been able to use them. I'm trying to think of the word that I'm thinking of.
Like competently, or like no, with like an understanding more like with what it's doing, maybe.
Yeah, more like with class. More like I've only been able to use them. Yeah, I don't know exactly the word that I'm thinking of, but it's been a journey, is what I'm saying, and I started, we started with the Metal Zone. My first pedal was actually the DoD grunge pedal, and I wish I still had that one. I always think of buying another one.
Those things are cool. I don't care what anyone says.
Just to be able to plug one in. Yeah, exactly.
I've got one. It's out on loan right now, but I got it. I bought it kind of as a joke a little bit. Like, haha, the grunge pedal. Mm-hmm. And I just grabbed one because it was cheap. And I got home, plugged it in. I was like, oh no, this thing can rip. Like, I like it. It's fun.
That's awesome.
It's good. Find yourself one. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, I remember being in the music shop, and I didn't know anything from anything, but the guy said, "This is the most gain of any pedal that we have in the shop." And I said, "That's the one I want."
Of course.
To play through my solid state Fender amp that I had at the time. Just ridiculousness.
It's just good science.
If you hear, our first album is called, well, it's not even officially released, but it's called All Work and No Play. And I was playing, that was my setup, was the DoD grunge pedal through a solid state Fender amp. And my guitar sounds humorous. It sounds like a kazoo. There's like no low end, and it's just all gain. And it's funny that, like, I would end up being the one out of our band, like, to kind of like chase down the tone side of things. But yeah, I mean, I can remember our bass player saying, he was like noticing when we were first, before we were even on the road really. And he would always say, "Man, I love how you take time to like listen, and you're always tweaking your amp, and you're always like doing this." And I would go over to him and then later when we do fly shows and things like that. And I would always go over to him and help him tweak in his bass amp to where it sounded good. And then I started, I would go over to Matt, our singer, and I would help him. He would play, and I would just turn all the knobs on the amp until it sounded good. And I just started like developing that as a skill because I liked doing it, and I felt I was good at it. I felt, and I just appreciate the gear side of things. I appreciate like the feeling that I get, and I'm not really sentimental towards gear. There's really not many pieces that I own that I have any kind of attachment to. There are some things that would be way harder to replace, if at all, able to replace. But even that is more of it's less of an emotional attachment and more of a, just it would be difficult to process to try to replace this thing. It's like the physicality side of it. But the thing that I love about gear, the thing that I have always attached to is picking up something, playing something, whether it's an amp, guitar, pedal, an effect, any kind of thing that is part of you playing the guitar, part of you playing your instrument. I love picking up something that inspires me, that makes me want to play a certain way. I love turning on a pedal that makes me just, you turn on a fuzz pedal and you just kind of want to like do different things than if you turned on a Tube Screamer style or an overdrive. I love picking up like an old Les Paul Jr. and you just like want to play power chords and like play Green Day songs and do what like do whatever. And then but I also love picking up like an old 60s Jaguar Jazzmaster and you just like want to turn the reverb all the way up and like use the tremolo bar on it. And so that's the part of gear that I've always loved. And I also love the idea of picking up an instrument or a piece of gear and somehow inspiring or making you even just want to play. I love that side of it. Like where you plug something in and there's the excitement of something new, but also it's just like, I just want to play guitar when I use this. So that's always been like the exciting part of gear to me.
I totally understand that. And I just had one of those moments yesterday, actually. I borrowed a Chase Bliss Therme, from.
Yeah. I haven't played that one yet.
Oh man. I knew it was going to be cool, right? Because all their stuff's cool. I've always liked their pedals, and Joel's amazing. But that one is one of the first ones in a while that I've really zoned out on, and like, oh, where'd the time go? And I borrowed it from Chris over at Benson Amps, and he was like, "Here, you need to play this because you haven't played it yet, and I need to get some things done and can't stop playing it. So." You take this away from me for a little bit. And so I was like, oh yeah, it looks like a cool pedal and I know it's going to be rad. But just like you said, I was like, oh, where did the time go? I've been in this thing.
Like you want to play. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That is what is good about gear. You're right.
I think the other side of gear to me too is like me knowing that when I'm playing guitar on a track or we're working on a song or I'm, even writing something, I know that I'm going to approach it differently depending on what guitar I choose to pick up. And that's kind of exciting. I think that's kind of like fun, to think, oh, if I pick up a Stratocaster here, this song may end up differently. Like I may want to play. And if I pick up the Jazzmaster, this song may get super angular and like I might start using the tremolo bar. Like I just know this about myself. Whereas I pick up a Les Paul or 335 or, an instrument like that, it will kind of have a different character,
Do you purposely select things like, say you guys are working on a song or you're working on something by yourself, whatever the case may be. Do you purposely go, I kind of want this vibe, so I'm going to grab XYZ, pieces of gear because I know that I respond in this manner. Like you just said, will you purposely seek that out?
Definitely. I do that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm really into themes as well. So, like when I think through songs, I a lot of times we'll make notes. I'll actually write them down, like when I'm working on a song or on a demo of a song, and I'll say on the recording, this is what I want to try. And usually the thing that I wrote down that I want to try ends up working. Sometimes it doesn't. But I just like that whole process, and I like how albums tend to have themes, like when I think back to our album, even though I was using a rat a lot in general, that was the first time that the rat was the sound of that record. And it was really the rat through that Marshall super lead, is on every single track on that recording. And it just became a thing. Like I was literally not even turning the knobs really between songs. And we wanted to have that kind of feel. Whereas, if we look at like our last album, Air for Free, I used a lot of a vintage tube screamer, a lot of a Fender tank reverb, some smaller old amps, and just like kind of classics, as far as that goes. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of our last record. I think of like Fender-y guitars and kind of like overdrive-y, almost like surf kind of feel in my mind.
That's very interesting.
So yeah, I like I love the idea of themes. I love the idea of taking gear and putting it into a category of themes. So like on Air for Free, our last record, I think I only used a rat pedal maybe twice on the entire recording. Even though that has been such a signature part of my sound, it just never really went there. Not that often.
Right. Sometimes you need to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you've been doing it for a while. That's
yeah. So even gear wise, asking about being into gear, I've always been interested in it, but I definitely go through seasons of, I've gone through 4 or 5 years without really buying a single thing, and I've gone through 1 year of buying 100 things and selling 80 of them back, and just constant. It's just this constant movement of pieces and trying to find something and just being really interested, reading reviews, being on the gear page or whatever, trying to always track down whatever's happening.
Yeah. I'm such a gear hoarder. Like I have a really hard time selling.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, I have a really hard time selling anything. Like I'll try to like, I mean, I'm to a point now, and I've been saying this for a little while, but I've only sold one guitar, and I've talked about it on the show a couple times, but I desperately wish I wouldn't have sold that guitar.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not an expensive guitar. It was just this cheap, like old Japanese short scale, and it was called a Marquis. It was probably, I don't know who made it specifically, but it was really unique. Had like 4 pickups, and it was this weird thing. And I sold it. It actually played really good, which is, kind of an anomaly sometimes with those kind of instruments. And I kick myself because I can't find it now. Like I can't find another one of those. I can find Harmony Bobcats and stuff like all day long, but I can't find this weirdo. Yeah. But now
Oh, dude, yeah, I totally get that.
Well, I'm starting to have this vibe with I have a 65 Melody Maker that needs some love, and it's needed some for a while, but it's not getting played at all. All my other guitars get played on the regular basis. This one has just kind of been, it's there. It's just as accessible. And so I keep having this nagging feeling like I should probably get rid of it, but am I gonna regret it again? I don't know.
It's super interesting to me. I feel like a turning point for me was when, my first good guitar, so before then I had like a Samick SG copy, like just garbage instruments. And when we first got our first advance for our first record, we went to Guitar Center and I bought a standard American Telly. And that was my only guitar for about the next 5 years. I literally would keep like a pack of strings on top of my amp in case I broke one during the show, because I just didn't have another guitar. And so that guitar, I felt like I'd just been through thick and thin with that guitar. I had all sorts of different pickups in it. I had changed the pick guard on it. I felt like it was my guitar. I felt like very connected to it on a deeper level, if you will. And we were working on music at Matt's house. It was right after he had moved to Nashville. This is probably like 9 years ago or so, 9 or 10. And he had some people over, had a party at his house or something, and I had left my guitar in his music room, and someone stole his laptop and my guitar out of his room. And I was super bummed. I was like, I tried to tell him, like, I was like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a guitar, you know, whatever. But I'm like, oh, I felt so sick about it. I felt like, you know, of all the guitars that were going to get stolen, like that's maybe the one that I would be actually bummed about. And I did feel bummed about it. But you know, I just didn't really talk to him about it. And, you know, I didn't want him to feel bad. I didn't feel like it was his fault. But I feel like after that point, I started just seeing gear a little bit differently. We also had a bus fire not long after that, where we were driving down the road and our bus caught on fire and most of our trailer burned down. Oh, geez.
Whoa.
And we lost a decent amount of gear there as well. But I remember that being easier because I was already like, well, I lost my favorite guitar. So like all of this is replaceable. It's whatever, you know? So maybe I started seeing things a little differently at that point. Because I don't feel like there's anything I necessarily feel like I need to hold on to, or I can't exist as a guitar. You know, there's nothing I feel like is, like a must. And actually those times when I feel like I start selling the most gear, you know, I'll list 20 or 30 pedals at a time sometimes. And, you know, I'll sell guitars. And I feel like sometimes when I'm trying to get rid of the stuff the most, it's like I'm on Reverb or something, and I'll start seeing other cool things and buying more things. And I'm just like, oh, what am I doing? You know, like it's like this funny back and forth where to me, it's way more so. It's not about keeping something because it's the best or because it's really good. It's about keeping something if it's being used and inspiring you, if it's being played. And, you know, I just got rid of 2 guitars that were similar to the one you were talking about. One was a 1961 Supro guitar that I've had for a long time and really enjoy. And another one's a 64 Silvertone that I had. And I played a lot of both of those guitars. These 2 were pretty special to me. Like they played awesome. But after the second time of getting them set up, after maybe pulling them out once in the last year, I decided that it was time for a new home for them. And it wasn't that I needed the money. It wasn't that it was taking up all this space and cluttering. It was mainly to me at that point that it was, I feel like someone else could play these guitars. These are amazing guitars and I'm just not playing them. And actually all I'm doing is spending money on the upkeep of these instruments, you know? So that's where I felt better about moving them.
Sort of where I'm at with this one. Like it's a good guitar. Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand. Yeah, I understand your plight. I've been in this space before, and I typically sell. I sell when I need to, and I like that because then if I were to come across a guitar later, I think, oh, well, I sold that one and this one, so I can totally just buy this one now and not think about it. You know, that's kind of my my thought process.
I need to work on that. I just hoard. I just hoard and hoard and hoard. And my solution is not let's get rid of some of this stuff. It's that's what's actually kind of different for me than maybe some other people is I do hoard, but the majority of my stuff does get played fairly regularly. I play almost every night, and I try different things. I try weird things, and so it's not very common for something to sit for 6 months without having been touched. It's pretty. that's pretty rare. And that's what's happened with this Melody Maker. It's sat for probably about 6 months, and I haven't really had the urge to play it. And I'm like, I used to play this thing all the time. Maybe I just need to. I keep thinking probably what I should do is get it set up, get the new bridge put on it that it needs, and then decide. Like, maybe that will make me start playing it again, because it does need a new bridge.
Yeah.
It's got this. I bought it with this jankety kind of knockoff. I can't remember like what it is, but it doesn't work. It needs replaced. So I wonder if I get it changed. Whether I need to sell it or whether I decide to keep it, I should get it fixed up, because whoever gets it's going to want it to work better. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I start on a lot of them. Is I get them set up or taken care of, serviced in whatever way, and then I decide. If so another example, I have a Japanese Fender baritone guitar that I bought years ago because we were doing a song that we were trying to do it super low tuned for whatever reason. And so I bought this baritone guitar, and it's very cool. It's like black, it plays really nice. And they don't really make them anymore. I don't often see them come up, and they're not like crazy expensive instruments. But it was the similar kind of thing where I was like, oh, this has been sitting. I haven't touched this guitar in 4 years. I let my friend borrow it for a year and a half, like that kind of thing. And so I got it set up, and I brought it back home, and I immediately wrote a song on it. It was like I picked it up after getting it set up, and I wrote a song on it just right away. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll keep it. It was just like I connected with it in a different way. And so I was like, okay, I can use this one now. I will keep this one now. But it was funny because I hadn't played it for 4 years, So I don't know. It kind of goes back to that, like, will you wish that you never sold that one special thing, because maybe even 10 years down the road you'll get it set up and fall in love with it again? Maybe, I don't know, but I try to not think about it.
I probably think about it too much. That's the issue. Different. That's true.
No,
I'm
we're
weird.
All weird.
I know I'm weird. As long as I'm
obsessed with instruments like this, it's a weirdness. So I think we can all relate to each other in that way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, my wife has gotten to, be around a lot more of, musicians and guys like me just through doing these type of things. And she's always just like, you're all the same. We're nerding out about, different things, and guitars fading to, from Pelham blue to green and like all this stuff. And she's like, I just can't believe it, how excited you guys get about this stuff.
Yeah. Like, funny.
It is. I'm not trying to justify it. It's weird, but I like it, so it's fine.
Yeah, I feel like that. I think that often partners are in that scenario. But I even think about it with like the singer or the drummer of our band. They always know. They always kind of joke around. If we're on tour with another band, they're like, "Oh, you're the gear guy. You're going to talk to Matt over here," and they just like don't understand it. They're just like, it doesn't matter. It's not part of my my world, So
I haven't dealt with the variety of, or not dealt with, but like interacted with the variety of drummers that you probably have through being on tour. I would imagine that drummers would nerd out on the different aspects of their kit just as much. Is that generally not the case?
No, I think it just depends. It's just like guitar, everyone approaches it differently. I do think with drums there is just more gear, and like there's more physicality to it. There's more like know-how and tweaking and tuning, and I think there's more physicality to the sound.
Of course,
you kind of have to have a little bit of like manual knowledge of what you're doing. I think a lot of times guitar players can like barely tune an instrument. We always joked about that, like when Gibson went to the robot tuning guitars, and we're like, oh, that's like the lead singer guitar. It's like the guy who can barely plug in his instrument. And that's not to say he's a bad player, but just has a very limited know-how. But it seems like if you're a drummer, you're kind of like required to understand how things are working.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially because I mean, not that guitar isn't, but the drums are so personalized. I'm not a drummer, but I've sat behind a kit a couple of times, and it's just like every one I've sat behind, it's like I'll have to adjust it a little bit, and I don't even really know what I'm doing. I just know I can't hit it that way. It's weird, but
definitely.
Well, we should be talking about some other things that you've been cooking up lately. Well, actually, it's been a long time coming. Why don't we talk about 1981 Inventions and how that came to be and what it is and all that stuff?
Yeah, let's jump in. I had this idea for a guitar pedal. I met Jono from Bondi Effects while we were on the road. He was a friend of a friend in Kentucky. We were playing a show in Kentucky, and my amp had gone down at soundcheck. I don't remember what happened. It was some sort of power surge in the building or something, and it literally, I've never seen this in my life. It literally cracked the tubes of my amp, and
weird.
It was not usable. And just had completely fried every tube in the amp. And so I was trying to get that sorted before the show, and it was becoming difficult. So I called my buddy that lived locally that I knew was a guitar player and had a bunch of gear. And I said, "Hey, do you have anything I can use tonight?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm out of town, but my buddy has something. He'd be happy to loan you an amp for the night." And it was John from Bondi Effects. And so he came down, and he was very kind and let me borrow Matchless, or I can't remember what the amp was. It was a very nice amp though, and I was very thankful. And just trying to talk to him for a bit, and he was like, "Oh, I'm actually working on a pedal for myself. Let me bring it in, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, or I'd love to give you one." And I said, "Hey man, I'm like super burned out on boutique gear in general right now. I'd just kind of been through the ringer with feeling like boutique gear was just not thought through, that it was just doing something inherently wrong to my signal, that it was breaking all the time. I was kind of like actually a little bit against it at the time, the idea of something being handmade and using it on stage." And
interesting.
It was a funny time. So he brought that up to me, and I just said, "You know what? I'm not interested. I'm happy to plug it in and give you my thoughts on it, but that's all I can promise you." And he started explaining to me what it was, and that it was, based on the Klon and how he'd done different things. And I was like, "Oh no, that sounds interesting," because there weren't a lot of people that I knew of at the time doing this. And I was like, "Oh, I'm interested to plug it in." And that was an early version of the Sick As, and I plugged it in, and I was like, "Holy crap, this is great. I love this. I connect this. This sounds different than the Klon to me, but cool." And I used it that night, and I used it the rest of the tour, and it's still on my board, So like that was just like something where I connected with John on a personal level, but really where I connected with him was hearing the circuit that he made. And really being able to appreciate that and just kind of have that common bond with him in that way. But we've been friends, for a long time, 6 years or so now. And so shortly after that, I started talking about the Sick As, and he was like, "Man, I think you've sold a ton of that pedal for me. I'm not exactly sure." He was like, "But people seem to notice what you're doing." And I was like, "Hey man, we should do a pedal through Bondi that is, kind of like my kind of vibe." I had never thought about designing a pedal myself. At the time, I was only doing, I'd done a few like build your own clone kits and things like that. I'd done a couple like rat mods on previous things, but I'd never thought about designing my own guitar pedal. And I was like, "Well, obviously he would be better at it than me." And he was like, "Well, no, I've got another idea. Why don't I just help you engineer a guitar pedal? Why don't I help you figure it out, and I'll teach you how to do it, and we'll like kind of walk through it together. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So we started on this journey about 4 years ago from now, and just started the process of talking about where we were going to go, breadboarding, doing actual, like starting to lay out circuits, starting to do tweaks. In the first year, I think we did 4 different fully formed prototypes, like to the point where we were ordering circuit boards, to the point where we were feeling like maybe this was close enough to release. And each time that we got close, we both actually kind of we've always kind of agreed on things very, very fluidly, but we both even at that time we'd get a circuit board done, we'd do some tweaks on it, and then both of us would be like, you know what, this is just really wrong. We need to start over, kind of thing. And so we kept doing that. And it just kind of stayed on the back burner as like this fun thing that I would tweak around with when we had some time off from the road or other things. And then John and I moved back to Australia about 2 years ago or so, and we just stopped working on it. And he called me again the end of last summer or early fall of last year and said, hey, let's finish this via FaceTime. And from there is really where the pedal started taking on its own form, really becoming something new and unique and interesting. And from the things that we were doing at that point is really when the pedal became what it is today, and it's releasable.
Yeah, it seems like it first came on my radar, like, I don't know, shortly after you guys started working on it, maybe right after, when you still had that raw, like, handmade steel case. Yeah. You remember? Yeah. I mean,
that was probably exactly 3 years ago. Yeah, I think it was right around Summer NAMM that I finished that. Yep.
And I remember talking to you about it right around that time too. And then, yeah, it came out again recently. I was like, oh yeah. I thought, like, for some reason in my head, like at one point I thought it had already came out, and then it hadn't. It was like, you probably got questions on it all the time, because it seemed like there was a lot of people talking about it, peripherally. Is that?
Yeah, I'd hit on this a little bit earlier, but when I started doing it, when we got to a point where I thought it would be a little bit close, I thought I was one revision away, and this is probably 3 years ago now. I started an Instagram page, and just because I wanted to document what was happening. I wanted to show the process of breadboarding, trying new things, prototyping, just the different phases of behind the scenes. I thought that would be like an interesting look, or for even to someone to be able to go back and see where it all came from. And I felt like that added a certain level of legitimacy, not in trying to force legitimacy, but just saying like, hey, this is a thing that's, we put some serious effort into this process. And here is kind of a documentation of that process. And it's funny because it became a little bit, even as I neared the completion of this, it became a little bit of a sore spot for me to think about the social media element, because it was like I was actually doing more than I had ever done, and I didn't want to post about it at all, because I feared every single time I would post about it that I would have 10 people commenting or messaging me just saying, when are you actually going to release this? This is the most ridiculous thing, I'm unfollowing you. Like people would just kind of like angrily come at me, and I'm like, you know what? You're totally right. This has taken way too long, and it's been all hype and no delivery, no physicality. And so I would rarely post on social media because I didn't want any backlash. And so I said, even when it started getting closer and it started, getting to the point where I was making finished units, I was skeptical towards posting because I didn't have anything to offer. So I definitely feel more thankful now and validated in that, just actually being able to release a product that I feel like is thoughtful and tested and unique. And I don't know, I'm really proud of it on a lot of levels.
Yeah. Well, you should be. I thought they turned out great. They They look beautiful. I know that's something that you put a lot of time into thinking about and making sure that it all got right. And I just I know it took a long time. I think people will appreciate the result of all that. And so far, the feedback that I've heard has been pretty good. So
yeah, and I definitely need to get you one. I would love to hear what you think of the sound of it. When we had started this phase of the process, I was legitimately, my only goal was recreating my 1985 Whiteface Rat. And where it went from there was not, I didn't want to do any of the rat mods. I'd done all of the rat mods, and I had owned all of the, the Keeley mods and the Brian Wampler mods, and those are all like really great. But it was when I bought this vintage one, this one certain year, I was like, oh, this is the one I connect with the most out of all of these. And it's this old unmodified one. And what is the magic here? So we started doing all this research into like what was making it different sonically, and, even versus the reissue of that Whiteface Rat, like what makes the reissue sound different? And how can we... And that was even like where the name started coming to be, was this kind of like throwback. I wanted to create products that felt like a unique vintage pedal. And those were things I was excited by. And I didn't want to do any of the traditional mods, and I don't think that we've done any as far as I know. But the pedal has become something more unique. It's become highly tweaked on a lot of levels, and some of the tweaks that we did brought results that were unexpected. And I'll say this especially in the low gain character of the drive. I think is very unique. I've never heard anything that sounds quite like it. Do I think it's reinventing the wheel? No. Do I think it is essentially a rat pedal? Yeah. And I'm very straightforward about that. But to me, it sounds different, and it actually sounds different enough that my plan all along was to replace the rat pedal on my board. And when we finished this project, when we finished the design of it sonically, and I started playing it, on my personal pedal board, I didn't replace the rat because I was like, I think it actually sounds different enough that I actually still want the rat sound on my board, and I want to use this for something different. So I think that felt like I wasn't expecting that. I'll say that. So I was very thankful for that turn of events.
That's really interesting. What do we? I could be just ignorant to this, but what are we actually calling the pedal itself? I may have glossed over.
Oh that. Yeah, I actually don't really have a name for it, but I'm just calling it DRV, which is so there's 3 controls on it. There's DRV, there's cut, which is a high cut, essentially a modified rat filter. I was kind of going on the Vox name, and then VOL for volume. So it's I'm just calling the pedal DRV right now. The DRV, I don't know. I don't even really know. And it's funny because there's no branding on the pedal, and I wanted it to be that way. I wanted it to be minimal, like a little bit mysterious, but almost like so minimal that it's like funny, like it doesn't even say 9-volt on the top, even though it is 9-volt power. It doesn't even say in or out on the pedal. It says it in the manual. But I didn't want to put anything that didn't have to be on the pedal. So technically, yeah, there's no name. And when I figure out how to release other designs and other pedals, I'm going to have to figure out how to differentiate those.
That segues nicely into a next question I had, which is, was there plans for other designs? And you just kind of answered it. It sounds like there is.
Oh yeah. There's always been other plans. I mean, really, we switched gears by going to the rat recreation. We were like, okay, this was always one of our ideas. Let's just chase down that, So I'd love to continue working with Jono. I know it's a little bit difficult because he's in Australia, and really, John has helped me so much to become more self-sufficient in my abilities. And, I always say everything I've learned, he's taught me, kind of thing, as far as design and building and, just that entire side of it. But yeah, I have probably 10 or 15 other like outside loop ideas, and I probably have 3 or 4 pretty good, pretty thought out ideas that I would like to start chasing down as quickly as possible. The first one that I'll probably do is so part of the sound of this pedal is a preamp going into a Rat pedal. So that's what's built into the DRV, is essentially a boost pedal hitting the front end of the Rat, which to me fixes some of the issues with the Rat, fixes some of the perceived low end. It just makes it sound better to me. It just changes the character of the pedal. And so that was always something that I wanted to include in my version of the Rat. And, subsequently, a Rat sounds very different when you turn a boost on and off in front of it, whereas my pedal doesn't really sound that different. It sounds like you can hear the added gain stage, but tonally speaking, it sounds about the same. And so on my personal board, I actually decided to put my pedal before the boost pedal because I like to leave it on for the most part. And so, I've always been really into boost pedals. I've owned almost every one that you can own. And that is the next thing that I'm chasing down. And I was originally thinking that I would just release essentially the boost section of this pedal, but as I get closer to that idea, I'm kind of being inspired by some other things, some other vintage kind of circuits, and I'm interested in chasing down the idea of making those, bringing those into the modern era and making those kind of more viable and really just good sounding. I think boost of all things is like, you're clearly not reinventing the wheel. But it's just offering the correct tone shaping options with, whatever you can do. It's just making it sound good, So that's going to be my next thing that I chase down.
Well, very cool. We'll have to.
It's just a very simple boost, and then from there we'll go fuzz, overdrive, and I have some other kind of really wacky ideas from there.
Fuzz, my favorite. Oh, yes. That's cool. You'll have to keep me posted on all that. I'm excited to see what you're doing. I'm excited that this thing's
and
seeing the light of day and all that.
Yeah, honestly, I would love to get your thoughts on how this one sounds. I am very proud of it. I think it sounds, if nothing else, it sounds unique. It sounds specific. It sounds refined in a certain way. Like, to me, when I plug this pedal in, I feel like it doesn't hit that fear that I had, or that bad taste that I had of boutique pedals, of feeling like, oh, this isn't quite thought through, or maybe there's like a high-end frequency coming through in my guitar right now that's just screwing everything up. That was, so this one feels like it's been through the process of, it's been thought through.
I would say, based on what you just kind of told us here, is I think it's probably its best quality, is it's been very well thought through in just about every aspect.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's funny, and like I'm learning, but I figured out, we were having an issue with the switch. This is like 2 months before the release, and we had to figure out how to fix that, and how to fix the whole switching system, and make sure that it was quiet, and make sure my soldering was good enough to make sure that we wouldn't have any issues, and that it was grounding properly. And I can definitely thank a lot of friends for helping me along the way. Grant from Big Ear Pedals, Zach from Mythos Pedals, and then obviously Jono and from Bondi. So
well, that's awesome, very awesome.
Yeah, so it's been a good time.
So we're reaching the hour mark, and we haven't yet delved into the most important question that I always ask the guests.
Hit me with it.
It's a big deal. I hope it might be a little bit personal, but most people seem to be able to handle it after a few tears. What kind of pizza do you like?
Oh my goodness. Man, I like almost all pizzas.
Oh yeah, I'm with you. What's your favorite though?
I think I'm just a classic pepperoni guy. That's it.
Thin crust, thick crust, New York.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean this is important. We can't just call it a day.
Probably thin crust New York. Yeah, definite. Yeah.
You have a specific pizzeria that you like the best?
There's one in Nashville called 5 Points Pizza that is probably the closest thing to New York style that I go to a lot.
All right.
And you can also get it by the slice at whenever you need it, and it's really good.
And I so very often need it, so I'll be headed down there in a few weeks. I'll be sure to check out 5 Points.
Yeah, definitely check it out. There's a couple other great places that are kind of like very traditional Italian. You know, they'll use like the volcanic stone and stuff like that, which I also think is really great. So
it is.
There's a place called Desano's that is phenomenal. Yeah, I can put you in the right direction for some good pizza.
I'll hit you up. I'm gonna need pointed in the right way for the good pie. That's where I'm always seeking out the food.
Definitely.
At all times.
I can give you some taco recommendations, some barbecue.
Talking about Mas Tacos, por favor.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about that.
Yeah, it's so good.
That's the best one.
I love that one.
It is a hidden gem. Like when I remember the first time going there, because I've lived in East Nashville actually, where that is for 10 or 11 years or so now. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I went there and I was like, why have I never gone here before? I can't believe I've never gone here. I'd spent years of not going there. But like when they first opened, they've always been cash only. And when they first opened, they were open like 3 or 4 days a week from like noon to 3. It was like very limited. And then they also had a food truck. So it was like whenever you saw the food truck, or you'd have to follow them on Twitter and see where the food truck was at. So it was just kind of difficult to go there right off the gate.
Good times. I'll be hitting that up again for sure. For sure.
Definitely. Well, not to invite myself, but if you if you go there, let me know.
No problem. Will do. So for the final little last moment, do you have where can people find you? Here's your chance to put up a billboard. Where's all your information?
Oh man, my stuff's pretty easy. It's just basically on all social medias. It's at 1981 Inventions. You can email me. You can find me at 1981inventions.com. I actually plan on putting a couple blog kind of entries up there, just talking about some of the things we've talked about in my past, what has brought this pedal to be in existence, why it's different than a Rat, why, yes, if you I had this conversation with the kid on Instagram yesterday where, he was saying, oh, great, you made an expensive Rat. And I was like, no, I actually if you want to buy a Rat pedal, please go buy one. That's one of my favorite pedals ever. This sounds different. And, not trying to sell anything.
If you want it, get it. If you don't.
If you want it, get it. So. But yeah, that's, I wanted to start using my website more to, not only to sell my product in the short term, but to, just kind of like communicate and kind of continue to tell the story on like a bigger arc of what's happening.
Obviously, there's people that are very interested into the stories behind things because that's why this podcast exists. So I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
But, thank you very much for coming on, taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time.
For sure. Thanks for having me. Right on. Well, hit me up when you're in town.
Will do. All right. So for Matt, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. That was just a lot of fun. I had a good time talking to Matt. You may have picked up on the fact that was actually kind of pre my Nashville trip, and I did get to hang out with him for a while and kind of see his process and check out his treasure trove of gear that he has there in Nashville. It was pretty epic, and he has a 70, I think a 73. I can't remember exactly what year. Might have been a different year, but a 70s Tele Deluxe with the wide range humbucker in the neck and the bridge, and oh man. That thing was one of the coolest sounding guitars I've ever played. Further deepened my love for the wide range humbucker. Now I need to get a guitar that has two instead of just the single that I currently have. But all that aside, check out 1981inventions.com. The pedal's really cool. I now have one, and I got to play it, and I really, really like it. I'm like he talks about on the episode, I'm really surprised at the low gain character of the thing. That is not at all what I anticipated liking it for, but it sounds awesome at lower gain settings and is very sensitive, and I don't know. I think they did a great job on it. It's one of the prettiest pedals I've ever seen. I can't seem to take a good picture of it, but when you have it in front of you, it's like, wow, this thing is gorgeous. They really put a lot of time into the aesthetic, which, some people don't care about, but I do. So, whatever. So, let's see. Any housekeeping we got to do? I think we're good. If you need a little more Tone Mob in your life, of course, there is the Patreon page. So you can go to patreon.com/ToneMob. And there's, several hours. I think we're on 8 episodes now. So there's hours of listening over there. If you need more additional content, it's generally me and my good friend Justin Porter shooting the breeze in the shred shed. So it's a little bit different vibe than what you're used to, but it's been really fun. So last time was a reverb shootout. This time was a little more of our just gear nerding conversation, I believe, is what's going to correspond with this particular episode. So patreon.com/ToneMob to check that out. And let's see, what else? Yeah, you may remember, the last couple weeks I've been asking just to tell a friend, and that's all I would need. If you could just tell a friend, somebody you think would be interested in this, if you could personally, literally go tell them, I think that has a lot more meaning to it than sometimes sharing on Facebook or some of these other places. Not that isn't extremely helpful as well, but if you got somebody, maybe your local guitar tech, maybe, who knows? I don't know. Somebody probably in your guitar lives that might enjoy some of these ramblings. And if you do, please share that with them. That would mean everything to me. So until next time, have a good week and keep it on the fuzzy side. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.